Hey, what's going on? It's Doug Cunnington here, and this is The Doug Show. I'm interviewing my new friend, Roxanne, who is, I guess, part of the sort of financial independence movement and part of that community. And she has some great accomplishments that we're going to talk about. She and her husband paid off $49,000 in debt. They bought a home in cash, and they are aiming towards financial independence in a few years. And we're going to get all into the details. So, welcome, Roxanne. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing really well, and I'm pumped to talk to you. I think we have a lot of like big accomplishments that you've done that we can really unpack and hear how other people can do it. Because when you just hear some of these headlines and you don't have the details behind it, it sounds like insurmountable in a lot of ways. So before we get into those details, who are you, and what do you do? Just give us a little background on yourself.
Sure. Yeah. Who am I? Good question. So, I started financerocks.com about 3 years ago. I am a blogger and YouTuber, personal finance coach. So, really, my goal is to help people pay off debt, save more money, and really find more confidence and joy in their finances. So many people face it and it's dreadful. So, trying to flip that and really get people engaged. I struggled with financial stress when I was younger. And so it's kind of been my life mission to eliminate that for myself and now helping other people with it.
All right. And as far as your like sort of previous career, can you give us a little background on that too?
Yeah. So I graduated with a degree in accounting and a minor in planning 2 months worth of projects in 1 month. I'm just kidding. That was
That was good. I was like, oh wow, that's very good. Yeah, sorry, I'm
a
like too
unique,
serious there.
unique minor. No, but I graduated in accounting. Started working in accounting and found it kind of monotonous. I really like doing different things all the time. I get bored kind of easily. But I started working at a nonprofit, and thankfully, I was able to kind of switch roles every few years. So I did a little bit of payroll, I did accounts payable, regular accounting, and then I transitioned into financial analysis, data management, project management. Yeah, so a lot of different things. I worked there for 9.5 years, and I just stopped working in March to work on Finance Rocks full time.
Very cool. And we could unpack some of this too, but you're in the Bozeman area, and that's where I moved from recently. So I was just watching YouTube videos as I do sometimes, and one of your videos came up, and I checked it out, and I was like, "Oh, Bozeman, that's super cool. It's a small town," and just that alone was probably the one of the main triggers where I was like, "Oh, I'd love to talk to someone from the Bozeman area." So how do you like it there overall? I mean, you recently bought a house, so you're putting down roots, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. So I grew up here. I grew up in Anaconda. So I know what you mean. It's really nice to meet people from Montana because, there aren't that many of us. And especially like the overlap between, living in Montana and like financial independence. Like I was so glad that you reached out to me. I love talking to people about money. And yeah, so it's been good. Yeah, I like it here. Wish that there was more of a Phi community, which I'm jealous of you because you get to go to MMM headquarters.
Yeah, very. It's strange to be like so close and neighbors with some of the big dogs in the Phi community. So cool. Well, let's move on to some of your accomplishments. So one of the top bullet points is paying off $49,000 in debt. So can you talk to us like where did that debt come from, and how did you approach it? Because that's obviously a huge amount of money.
Yeah, so that is combined for both myself and my husband, and it was mostly student loans. 35,000 of it was student loans, and then we had two vehicle loans and our engagement ring. So yeah, I graduated school, and that was the time the most debt we had was the 49. Right after that, we moved to a farm and farmed for 5 years near Great Falls. And during that time, we didn't really want to rely on my husband's income. So we said, okay, we'll use my income to pay off debt. And then, hopefully we can just reinvest into the farm. And then Hopefully someday it'll make money. So we used mostly my income for 5 years to pay it off. And yeah, I think it's a lot of it is frugality and just focusing on like day-to-day actions. I also consider myself to be a workaholic, especially during this time. So that helped as well.
What kind of farm?
So we did barley, wheat, and then we had about 100 cows that each year they would calf and we would sell the calves.
Okay. And I know that Montana is one of the biggest growers for like barley and wheat and corn, and they supply a lot of breweries. So were you a supplier for breweries?
Yeah, I think it was cores,
Okay.
also primarily.
Very cool. Yeah, and are you a big beer drinker yourself?
I'm not. I like the girly beers, the grapefruit ones, and that kind of thing. My husband loves like, oh gosh, he loves like Belgian white kind of beers, and
Okay.
he loves, yeah, all the dark beers he loves. So
Okay. Well, it's a good thing that you're not, because that would have been a whole other tangent that we would go down. So,
yeah,
all right. So you were doing the farming for about 5 years, and actually I had no clue. So I have no idea, but I imagine that's not a super lucrative business, but I could be wrong. So were you able to like pay off a lot then, or yeah, what was going on during those 5 years?
that was when I first started working with my degree in accounting. So I started out making like 18,000 that first year, but then like scaled up to about 36,000. So we lived very frugally because we were able to pay the full 49,000 out of that essentially. And then my husband, he grew up with farming, so he was knowledgeable about it, and his dad would come out to the farm and give him advice. We also traded equipment in exchange for him working. So like my husband would work on our farm and then head out to their farm, which was about an hour away. Between those, we did get lucky because his dad owned the farm that we leased, and so the ground hadn't been worked as hard as it could have been. So the first few years were very productive. So we ended up after the 5 years, we cashed out with about $230,000. So that's his full income for 5 years. So divide that by five.
Okay, gotcha.
So not massive, but good for being right out of school and good for Montana.
Right, especially sort of smaller towns in general. And I mean, for the people that don't know, in Montana, the salaries are like kind of depressed compared to a lot of other places. Like I think in with my background in a big city, I could probably make 130, but in Montana, it was probably like 75.
75 is still good. Like, I mean, I think it was like 40 to 50 is our average.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy, especially in the Bozeman area. It's very expensive because there's a lot of people that work remotely that have the big city jobs so they could buy big houses. So, that said, you recently purchased the house. You bought it in cash. You mentioned 210,000, and that wasn't that far after the farm, the few years at the farm. So, how were you able to pull together the 210?
Yeah, so that was what we did with like the money from the farm. The 200 of it went to the house, and the rest of it we set aside for my husband to go back to school. So he went and got a master's degree in software engineering. So he did that. So we've actually been in this house for 5 or 6 years now. So he actually was able to make money during that time too. We weren't sure if he would be able to work, but basically broke even on that. So essentially the rest of the farm money just went to savings.
Got it. And so 5 or 6 years ago is when you bought it, so it's probably worth like 300 or 350 now, something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, 300 is about where I have it pegged for appreciation, which is really good. 210 to 300 since, gosh, it was 2014.
Yeah, 30%. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty good.
So why did you buy the house outright versus investing it? And right now, when we're recording in 2020, interest rates are like crazy low, but of course, 5, 6 years ago they weren't as low. But yeah, why did you decide to buy versus just invest it?
Yeah, that's a good question. We talked about that at the time a little bit. I was still very new to investing and didn't really have a whole lot of comfort level. I don't know about you, like, when you were first starting getting into investing, like, did it come pretty naturally? Like, yeah, I just didn't have anyone to like ask about. So ultimately, we decided, we'd go ahead and just use the cash for it. But yeah, I do go back and think, oh, maybe we should have invested it.
The good part is like you could always change your mind. Like right now, if you, I don't know the name of the mortgage, if it's a home equity line or how you have to like organize it from a banking and loan standpoint. But yeah, you could always go back and pull the money out and then throw it in the stock market and then have like $500 a month for your mortgage, like whatever you want to do. And then, I mean, yeah, it's a good question. I ended up not really getting into investing until we had really saved up a lot of money and then realized we weren't saving it fast enough and we just had too much cash, basically. Fun problem, right? And then we found Mr. Money Mustache and some similar folks who, you know, index funds, go Vanguard or something similar. So that's sort of where we aimed. And then we just bought a house that's, a lot more expensive, but it fits into like what we're trying to do, which I don't even know what we're trying to do exactly, but it fits in, budget wise. So I think the interest rates that we got in 2020 very good. So it's kind of a no brainer to go ahead and borrow the money and then put more money into the stock market.
Yeah. And that's kind of what happened to us too. We were trying not to count on that money from the farm. So like not even thinking about it as it existing because you can have one bad year on the farm and it just wipes out all of your profits. So we really weren't counting on it. And then, we got the final numbers on like the cost, like how much we could sell the cows for and how much we could sell our remaining grain for. And then we were like, oh, okay, what are we going to do with this money? So a good problem to have, like you said.
Gotcha. And to go back to, I guess it sounds like you liquidated the farm assets, right? So you didn't own the property, you were renting it, and then you would make money selling the goods, and then you just sold everything that you had and whatever assets you accumulated from like farm equipment or whatever. And then okay, so that's how you had the sort of lump sum. Okay. When you were doing that and accumulating, did you know it was going to be that much money, or you just all of a sudden you were like, oh, holy cow, like this is a pretty good cash out if we do it right now?
Yeah, we didn't know. We did not know. Basically, our expectation was we're just going to try to break even, like try not to lose money. Because, my husband grew up with farming, and so he didn't really know if he was going to like it. Our expectations were just really low.
Okay. And during that time, it sounds like, you mentioned frugality a couple of times. You currently have like a 50% plus savings rate. So, yeah, just tell us about it. And if you could share your like annual expenses, that'd be great too, to give people a scope of what, two people and a healthy dog cost.
Yes, healthy is a very polite way to say it. He is quite a chunk. But yeah, so right now we try to keep our expenses at about 40,000 per year. So that's everything. And that's it feels like we're living very richly. Like I know that's something like Mr. Money Mustache talks about. Like he feels like he's living it fully. And that's how we feel about it too. Since we don't have a mortgage or rent or anything, essentially we're spending about 7 to 10,000 per year on travel in regular years, probably about that much in dog food. And so, yeah, kind of as long as we stick with that, then, we save and invest the rest. And we've done a really good job controlling our expenses, really fostering a sense of contentment with, being happy with things and being grateful for what we do have.
And 40K for two people, that's really, and that's no mortgage. So that's like, I mean, you guys, that's not super frugal because some people
Yeah.
are living with, way less and they have a mortgage built in there too. So yeah, I feel like, you save frugal, but it seems like you guys probably indulge in areas that you really appreciate. So travels is one of them. Do you have some others? It sounds like it's a raw dog food diet. Like that food's expensive.
No, he's regular kibble. He's a kibble dog. But yeah, it's funny because like I started the channel around the time that we were like really feeling complacent with our money and really laid back. Back in the day was when I would go hard, like I'm not allowed to spend any money, just going kind of extreme with the frugality. So it's definitely a little bit strange to be talking about, but there are a lot of things that we are very frugal about, like our cars. We just bought a new car, $8,000 in cash. Like, compared to, we could have spent a lot on a car. The car I drive is worth about $1,400. So pretty frugal. I love my car, but yeah, it's getting old.
What kind is it?
Honda Accord,
Okay.
uh, like a '06 or '05 or something. So a good car,
Perfect.
but
I have a 2005 F-150. So it's
oh,
like, yeah, just plain, yeah, like an Accord. Like there's a
yeah.
ton of them out there and they're pretty reliable. They're cheap. It was cheap when I bought it. And yeah, I'm going to keep it for a long time. So, are there any areas that you are frugal where you're like, I know that aside from the car, right? Are there any other areas where you're like, hey, I'm saving money on this and I know other people just blow it?
Ooh, clothes. I buy like secondhand, like almost all my shirts and pants and everything. I'm the guilty kind of American that has the closet full of crap. And so I was just looking in there the other day and feeling grateful that I had like all $3 items instead of like $30 items. So yeah, I think clothes would be one. And you asked kind of what other areas do we like to spend on? We spend quite a bit on entertainment. That's my husband's favorite category. So he likes playing online games, video and board games, that kind of thing.
All right. And for the emergency fund, this is actually one of your more popular videos, so we'll definitely link it in the show notes and description for you. But yeah, what's in your emergency fund, and how would you guide people that maybe don't have one yet or they don't know how to approach it?
Yeah, so I like to break up my emergency funds into about five different funds just because I feel like people don't put enough why into their emergency funds. People will set like an arbitrary, like $1,000 fund, but you know, it's so much more meaningful to me to think through like, okay, this money is set aside for like if one of my brothers has a medical issue and I need to go to Seattle. So like calculating the cost of that. And then when I think about saving that money, it helps me save it because I'm thinking about my precious baby brother that I don't, that I want to be there for. It also helps me to keep my hands off of the emergency fund. So just helping with the boundaries of what that money's for. We keep about 24,000 in emergency funds right now, which I know is not incredibly high, but you kind of have to balance it, right? The kind of the optimization of everything with security is really important to me. I actually grew up below the federal poverty line. I try to do both, but for emergency funds, I go with the security.
Okay, and I'm ignorant. I don't even know for the the FI emergency fund. Like, what would the experts? I'm putting all this in air quotes. So, what would the experts say for 40K in expenses? Like, what would they tell you? And you own your house outright.
Well, so a lot of people say like 3 to 6 months of expenses. So basically, in addition to that, we keep other funds. So that's one component. So I do like okay, I need a new name for this because it's horrible and morbid, but a death fund. So that's about like $10,000. If I never spend it, it's like for my funeral, for life and death scenarios,
Mhm.
essentially. So don't ever touch that. The 3 to 6 months expenses, I do like a job loss. So that's the 3 to 6 month. Common shortage fund. So just kind of an excess to our checking, making sure we have money available for like annual payments, minimum balance. So just a few dollars so we don't overdraft. And then paper cash because I'm old.
Okay. All right. So that makes sense for people that don't have any emergency fund. Like, you laid out the buckets. Is there? And some people make it a little scared because they think, hey, it's too complicated. So, what's like the easiest way for someone to do it if they're new to putting together an emergency fund?
Yeah. So, I didn't start with the five buckets. I started with one fund, just the death fund, and just because that was the most important. So I wanted to make sure I always had that money. So I'd say start with one, and then kind of you can scale it up from there. It's just like goal setting. You wouldn't say, oh, okay, I want to save $24,000. You'd say, oh, okay, I want to have this first milestone being $950, for example.
And just break it down.
Break
Okay. Very good. Do you see people make like big mistakes with their emergency funds? I know you do some financial coaching and just help out folks that are not experts in the area. So, what mistakes do you see people make?
I think that people touch their emergency funds too easily. I like to think of those emergency fund like amounts as like triggers. Like if you're getting close to that, that should trigger you to say, okay, is the life I'm building sustainable? Can I, tweak my income to start making more income? Can I cut expenses? I think people just, go too quickly to that emergency fund. And then, like I said, like keeping arbitrary amounts, it's really helped me to keep my hands off that money because it's for very specific reasons that I've identified.
Got it. Very good. So let's move on to working on Finance Rocks. Pretty good name, Roxanne. I like that.
Thank you.
You quit your job in March and you've been doing this full time for a few months. So that's pretty huge. Can you like behind the scenes, like the conversations with like your family and your husband, like what did people think when you were proposing this idea?
Yeah, so I should probably say up front that I have not replaced my income with Finance Rocks. I actually do a lot of coaching for free still, just because, I'm trying to help people. And so it always feels a little weird to me to be like, oh, I'll help you with money, just pay me quick. I do a lot of coaching for free still, but I do some paid coaching and yeah, so wanting to try to build that is one of my goals. I want to make sure that like my husband's contribution, like helping fill in with like the house chores as I've been working full time on it. So yeah, haven't replaced my income, but yeah, my family, I don't know, I guess they weren't too surprised by it. I do like working and plan to go back to working. I've had a really good job and I enjoy like the 9 to 5. It's a little stressful running a business, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very stressful, especially like the first like few months. And when I was working on my company, I was already side hustling for a couple years, so I kind of jumped in with a pretty big head start versus you were kind of starting. I mean, you were blogging for a couple years, but it sounds like this is a much bigger endeavor, and you weren't able to I was able to leverage a lot of what I was doing during the side hustle period. It was super stressful for about 6 months, and then it eased up once I got a little more traction. So how scary was it and is it as you're like looking at the long grind of like growing a business?
Yeah, it's intimidating for sure. I don't come from a family of entrepreneurs. I've always like really admired it. Like I think it takes, a lot of like courage to go and do your own thing. And yeah, so I mean it's a struggle for me. It doesn't come naturally. I don't consider myself to be like a big hustler or anything. So that's been challenging. As far as like the money side of it goes, it's been hard to give up like the opportunity cost of having that full-time income from me, but ultimately we're still saving almost half our income just off of my husband's income just because, he's a software engineer now. So we're pretty secure from that side, which I'm really grateful for. Because like you said, a lot of entrepreneurs, it's a struggle. They need to make the money.
Yeah. And why you mentioned a couple things that were surprising. One, you were like, I like the 9 to 5. Like, what did you like? Because that sounds crazy to me. But you were working maybe at a place where people, wanted to work versus a lot of folks that work in IT, like myself. We just hate it. So yeah, why did you like it?
Yeah. So I had a lot of flexibility at my job, which was really important to me. I mostly got to choose the projects that I wanted to work on. I got to like use my boss for support, like really cool bosses. And so they were helpful. I got to learn a lot, try different things without that risk of, failure. And I love stable income. Yeah, I'm a big fan of that. So that's always been important to me. And yeah, no, I like having weekends free and less stress of having to make all the decisions. But
That's big. You mentioned you're probably going to go back to work, and like, do you have any time frame, or is that still open? Like, if things really take off with Finance Rocks and you're like in a good groove, like, that's also curious to me, where you're like, I'm going to go back to work, do the 9 to 5 grind. I mean, people call it a grind. So
yeah.
what's the story there?
So really, I wanted to take some time off work so that I could learn how to be an entrepreneur, learn how to run a business, because it's something I've always wanted to try to do. I'm trying to do like the YouTube stuff, so I have a lot to learn there as far as editing videos and SEO content. So I like learning, and so I'm kind of digging into those things. And my goal is to hopefully streamline so that way when I do go back to work, I can still keep it as a side hustle and have that side hustle income. But I also am considering kind of a career switch, kind of decide between maybe like going the CFP, like certified financial planner route and do the finance stuff, or if I should dig into tech, because I think I really enjoy doing like quality assurance or some kind of like project management for IT stuff. So I really like both of those and considering that.
Yeah. Well, if you want to talk about project management, I could do that later. I'll try and talk you out of it. But now you're
So,
shooting. What were you going to say?
oh, sorry, sounds good.
Yeah. So you're shooting for 5 by 39. So that's a few years away. Can you like take us through the timeline and sort of the assumptions for returns and like all the details? And I'll let you just add it. So go ahead.
Yeah. So our fine number goal is 1.6 million. So breaking that down as 1 million invested. So since I said our spending is 40,000 per year, that would cover that. And then, net worth wise, that would include our house, a cash nest egg, and the little vehicles or whatever. So yeah, I do use the 4% rule. Pretty common among five people. I've considered using 3%, but ultimately, we both like working, so it's a little hard to like go into all the details of exactly how it would work when realistically we probably will both still have some income. So I don't know. It gets kind of tricky there, right? Trying to figure out exactly how much you will need.
Yep. And I mean, the big component is like, if you know how much you're spending, if you know your expenses, then it's fairly straightforward. For the people that aren't familiar with the 4% rule, can you quickly just break it down in the simplest way, you know?
Yeah. So the 4% rule is an estimation of how much your investments will return that you can withdraw safely each year. So they assume that the market averages about 6 to 8% per year. So then you'd have to subtract off inflation, but they assume I think it's based on the Trinity study.
Yeah, there's a couple. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, a study, which I know there's flaws in it's difficult to calculate exactly how much you'll need, but so 6 to 8% minus inflation gives you about 4% per year that you could withdraw out of your accounts and not even touch your principal. So just every year living off of the returns.
Yep. And the 3% is more conservative because you're pulling a little bit less out, and you could do 3.5. And there's great simulators online. I don't know of any of the links, but you could Google it, and you could put in, your expenses, what you have, what you're going to have, what you think your expenses will be, and a number of other factors, including like Social Security, right? You could put that in as well. And if you have, like, I have some retirement accounts before I started putting money into, taxable investment accounts. So you could put all those details in and like run simulations. So, okay, cool. For the people that are thinking, hey, $1 million sounds like a really crazy amount. How can you possibly save that much? What do you say? What do you say to that?
Oh, yeah. It's overwhelming to think about saving a million, but first of all, you don't actually have to save a million because of like time in the market and oh gosh, compounding interest. Compounding interest. You don't actually have to invest a million to have a million. I really think it's important for people to kind of just focus on day to day, like trying to be frugal, focusing on making more money. Like, I didn't set out to be rich. Like, that was never my life goal. Like, I really wanted to be middle class. I thought that would be just fabulous. I just kind of kept my head down and went as hard as I could because I didn't know how long it would take to, kind of find security for myself. So, really focusing on just day to day actions and not getting overwhelmed by that amount.
Yeah, and I think that's perfect because I mean, if you're starting at zero, it does seem like pretty insurmountable. But you and I had careers ahead of time, right? And we probably saved a little bit because we were relatively responsible. And yeah, after a few years, you're like, oh, holy shit, I actually saved a lot of money. And then as you start making more, you're like, wow, I'm saving more. And you could definitely get the lifestyle creep where actually a lot of my friends actually talked to uh, a good friend of mine back in Atlanta, and he was a couple years ahead of me, and great corporate career, a lot more overachiever than I mean, I was like barely average, and he was like really good, getting promotions, just made great money, but he kept buying like newer, expensive cars and like bigger houses in the expensive areas, and like I mean, they're going to be working. Like, I don't even know how they're going to catch up. They have kids too, so that makes it quite expensive just in general, even if you don't even consider college, it's a lot more expensive. So anyway, yeah, it's over time, it's not so bad to accumulate that much. So once you hit, I guess like the million, right? Once you hit the 1.6, I guess in total assets, then you're in good shape. Do you think you will retire completely and stop working, or you'll just find something else you like to do?
So, if you had asked me that when I was a kid, if you had convinced me that it was even possible to have that much money, I would have said, I want to lay on the beach and, chill all day. A couple years ago, I was chilling on the couch after a particularly lazy weekend, and I thought to myself, oh, you know, I can't even take a weekend off without feeling unproductive and worthless. So
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that. So I think we're going to continue to work, but the nice thing about having money is that you have a lot of options. So we probably will do some travel. I'd kind of like to do like a year off and do slow travel around. Um, and I think that I've always wanted to live abroad, so we might become Canadians at some point. That would be great.
Oh, interesting. Do you guys have some? Was that a joke too? That I totally.
No, no.
Okay. Well, then I was like, because I've had some friends whose parents were Canadian. They got dual citizenship and stuff like that. So is that the situation for you guys, or?
Yeah, and we've never known any Canadians or lived there or anything, but we're so close to Canada here in Montana that I feel like it's almost like a safe choice. We could live there and enjoy it.
Taxes though, taxes will kill you up there. But
I heard.
they're so it's super nice people too. So
Mhm.
let's talk a little bit more about the retirement issue, right? Because I recently talked about this in a previous episode. One of my friends over at Niche Pursuit, Spencer Haas, wrote about like the fire community, like lying about the everything. But the biggest issue most of the time, and this is what Spencer honed in on, was the retirement aspect. And a lot of times people see that, hey, these guys are retired, and then it turns out, they're running blogs, they get like a million visitors a year, and they're probably making more than they did in their day job when they were doing really well also. So I usually push back on that, and I'm curious, Roxanne, like, what do you say when people are like, oh, they're not really retired, and this whole thing is just a big scam?
Yeah, that's like the retirement police, right? They're gonna come and lock you up for doing anything if you say you're retired. I like to think of it as just work optional. That you can hit the point where you don't have to work anymore. Like, I would consider that to be FI. I know it's hotly debated whether or not like you can really say that you're retired even though you're working, but I would still consider it to be because I use work optional.
I think that's the right way to approach it. It's not as sexy of a headline. So when it's covered, now it's like mainstream, right? It's covered in big news. So they have to have these crazy headlines like so and so retired at 30 or whatever. But one of my neighbors here, I don't know how old she is, but she has like kids in college. So I guess she's probably in her 50s, something like that. But she says, I'm semi-retired. So I think she works a few hours, and she's cut down. She has some hobbies that she can make money at as well. Like I think she does some pottery. So, I mean, there's a lot of different approaches, and I agree 100%. It's work optional, it's financial independence. So you have options to do whatever you want. If you want to do nothing, you can, but we're busybodies usually. So you can't stop. You just keep finding projects to work on.
Yeah. You
So
your heart in the you'll probably still work as well.
yeah, and I mean, I accidentally found this internet marketing stuff and YouTube, and I enjoy, connecting with folks like you and doing, just projects and learning new things, little side hustle areas, because it's great to learn new stuff. It keeps your mind active, which is very important. And I think, even if I wasn't doing this, I'd probably find, some other thing that I was interested in. So, yeah, I mean, they have there's some studies out there, and basically the places with the highest or the oldest lifespans, usually the people like keep working. They don't completely retire. So have you I think there's a place in Japan and maybe one in Greece, and but I should look it up. I didn't do any research ahead of time, so we'll move on. But when people have a purpose, like they live longer and they're happier, basically.
Yeah. And it's fulfilling. It's more fulfilling when you have something to do and you're helping other people, even if you're making money doing it. So yeah, I think it's good. Like you said, it's healthier.
There's some other sort of definitions that I'll lean on you as more of an expert in the FI area. People talk about lean FI and fat FI, coast. You told me a couple other new ones that I hadn't heard of, but yeah, I'll just let you sort of define them and riff on them a little bit.
Yeah. So I consider lean fi to be you have enough money coming in to cover your like bare necessities, like the absolute bare minimum. Other ones are like barista fi, where you could work part time. And I think it's barista particularly because I heard that like they get insurance. Like if you work at Starbucks, they cover your insurance. So I
Makes
think
sense.
that's where it came from. Like, so almost enough money to retire, but you can make part-time income, which covers your fun money kind of thing. And then just traditional financial independence. People, the rule of thumb is like 25 times your spending per year. And then like fat fire, which is like the opulence, just grandiose and opulence. And then I like to use like Bozeman Fi and Butte Fi because different areas have different costs of living. We are like almost Butte Fi, so we could sell our house, buy a median house in Butte, America, and not have to work.
And for the people that don't know, that is a cool small town, an old copper town off 90 over there, a couple hours away, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Not bad. So you could move out there. There's not as much to do, I guess, but and it's an old copper town, so it's kind of weird in that way. So for the fat fire, have you heard? Oh, and I won't even say fire. I'll say fat fi. So we won't even get in trouble with the retirement stuff. I've heard like six figures of expenses. Of course, it could scale to like whatever you want to spend, right? If you had a big family, you could spend like an unlimited amount on travel. But with two people, I would almost struggle to spend 100K.
yeah. That's where we are with it too. The weird thing about it is, you're trying to save money, so you just, kind of focus on finding happiness along the journey. And so, we're very happy at 40,000 per year. So it's almost like like you said, you'd almost have to try to spend more. Like we have to go out of our way to try to even hit 40. We've actually been at like 38, 39, 38 the last 3 years. So like even getting there, like trying to relax spending is, almost difficult, which is a weird thing to say, right?
Yeah,
Um,
it's crazy.
so yeah, it's a big number, fat pie.
So one of the other areas that you mentioned to me earlier was about just making sure you're getting your assets into a place where it could help you, so it could help you earn more and basically be income producing. So what's the struggle with that? Like, why is that hard, and what are you aiming to do to get to that sort of ideal spot?
Yeah. So I think that this has been a struggle for me because I value security more than freedom. So I, kind of lean towards cash hoarding, a collector of sorts. So trying to make sure that we are still optimizing, making sure that as cash comes in, we're putting it into income producing assets. So a few years ago, I started tracking how much of our net worth, what percentage is in income producing assets, and what percentage of it is in non-income producing. And so when I started out, I think it was like 80-20, like 80% non-income producing. So that was like our house and like our cash nest egg. So really, I've been focusing on trying to get cash invested, any new income, making sure it's getting invested. We do mostly stocks, mutual funds, index funds, kinds of things. So now we're almost at 50-50. So I'm really excited about that. I think next month we'll tick over to be 50-50.
Very cool. And can you tell us more about like where you do put the money? So you mentioned mutual funds and index funds. I'm big, like many of us, in just Vanguard, total stock market, the VTSAX for the people that are familiar. And as I tried to make it more complicated and put in other funds, and then I just see that VTSAX is better with the returns over time. So I'm just leaning more into that. But yeah, can you tell us more specifics?
Yeah, so maybe we should say I'm not a certified financial planner, so make sure you do your own research when choosing what to invest in. That said, we do mostly index funds. We have a handful of like target date funds, particularly for our retirement accounts. So if you guys are unfamiliar with target date, that just means it automatically rebalances each year to be a little bit more safer to get safer as you get closer to retirement. So a little less in stocks and a little more in bonds each year. I picked like the farthest out target date funds just to have the highest percentage of stocks. But that's we do that a lot. We do a lot of ETFs for our taxable brokerage accounts. And then I do some single stock trading because I think it's fun.
Oh yeah, nice. Have you had any big wins? Did you get in on Tesla or Amazon or Apple in the last 6 months?
So I got in on Tesla. That was one of my early ones I picked was Tesla. And it went up like, oh gosh, I think that was the one where it went up like 7%. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. So I sold it because it couldn't possibly go higher.
Oh,
And it was like $100 then. So
oh
I've
my
missed
gosh.
out on quite a lot there. But no, I like the like trying to manage the emotions of it. I feel like being frugal has helped like manage the emotion of the dips. Like we bought on the dip down just recently for the coronavirus, and I found that it's almost harder to decide when to sell because like I just want to like secure whatever little gain there's been. So I just enjoy the psychology of it.
Gotcha. And that's the part that drives me crazy because I did just a tiny bit, like right when I was starting to invest, and then realized it was way too stressful. And now I'm not even thinking about ever selling it. That's the luxury of, because I don't even want to do that at all. So I'm just throwing it in the index fund. And are you currently trying to balance at all with, stocks versus bonds? A lot of people will aim towards that, but you're obviously more than a few years out where you're going to need to draw on it. So are you fairly aggressive?
Yeah, yes, very aggressive with so like I said, we don't have all of our net worth in investments. So that's kind of more conservative. But then with the investments, yes, heavily stocks. And I calculated it like a month ago. We actually have like 70% of our invested money in taxable brokerages. So really like only 30% is in retirement accounts. So it'll be easier for us to access that money. Obviously not as tax efficient, but yeah, I wish I would have started investing in my 401k sooner.
Yeah. Did you start like right away when you started working, or
No.
no?
No, it was hard for me. I felt like investing was for rich people, not for me. I didn't know anyone who, was an investor or anyone that I could ask about it. And then finally one day, like a lady at work was like, "What do you mean you're not on the 401k? You should be getting the match." I was like, oh, okay, I actually need to. And so, yeah, 4% match, missed that for 2.5 years.
Okay. Well, I mean, it does suck, but your income was pretty low back then, so at least it's not as bad, right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, the tiny bit of a silver lining, but okay. And I guess for people that maybe they have access to like the 401k with their corporate job, how much should they be putting in, and how do you determine that with the matching and all that?
So it's pretty obvious that the match is important to get. That's part of your salary package. So you want to make sure that you're taking advantage of the match. And most financial advisors that you go to will say, like, make sure that you're saving 10 to 15%. That just is not an exciting goal to me. I'm like, I don't even get out of bed for less than 30. So like, in America, we're so lucky. A lot of people make good incomes. I think that like being able to save 30% is a good goal for people, even if they aren't like trying to achieve fire, just to have a goal to shoot for.
Yeah. And it gets a little fuzzy sometimes and more confusing with the matching. I know some of the companies that I worked for, they would match like 50% up to 3%. So that means I would need to put in 6% to get the full match. So they could make it slightly more complicated. But I would say I mean, I know I asked you the question, but I have an answer. I was like, you max it out. Like this year, I think it's like 19.5, right? So for
Yeah.
2020, it's 19.5. It adjusts every now and then. So it's usually just under $20,000. So just max it out if you have the ability to. And then, the other side of the coin, which I mean, we actually did exactly what you're talking about, Roxanne. So at some point, I stopped putting money into my 401k because I was like, well, I have to wait longer to get to it. Yeah, there's ways to get to it ahead of time, but I was like, I'd rather just put it in taxable funds, taxable accounts, so I can get to those funds whenever I want. So now, I mean, I don't even do it. And actually, this year I started for my company my solo 401k. So now I could put in the 19.5 and match it as my own employer. So whenever you
Mhm.
get to that point, you could do that too. So
Yeah, that's awesome. Hashtag goals.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, it's a weird. I was like, I need to save some money on taxes here. So I could match up to, I don't remember. I think it's like 35 that I could put in there, some 34.9. I don't remember. So
Yeah. What really kind of changed our mindset about it, because we had been maxing out 401ks and IRAs. But then we learned about required minimum distributions, RMDs, and realized that that would really affect our tax strategy for retirement. If we're happy living on 40,000 per year, we don't need to be withdrawing 100,000. If for some reason we save too much in our retirement and have to withdraw a huge amount, like that's going to be a lot more taxes than what I've factored. So something to think about there.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And I didn't even, I'm glad you brought up that point because I forgot about it. And it would have been a problem because, again, it seems like a weird problem, but if you start maxing out your 401k when you're like 23 and then you accumulate a lot of money, right? You have to take out a shitload of money every year. And like, it's more, I mean, that's why you would need a financial planner to help you figure out how to get your money out of there. So, very strange problem, but a good one to have. So,
Yeah.
all right. Well, are there any other things on your mind? Anything I didn't ask you that I should ask you?
Um, I don't think so. So I did have a question for you. I was wondering, does your family follow your YouTube channel? Like, are they subscribers?
I don't think so. I think my parents may see because I have it sort of automated to like pop up on Facebook that I put out a new video. So I think some of them like go, in their feed so they would see it, but I don't think they've really watched any in the sheer volume of videos that I put out. Like it's definitely just noise now. So I don't think so. And then I have two sisters, and I don't think they really follow. I think they're aware that I do some stuff, but yeah, I actually haven't really chatted with them on Fi or anything like that. Did you have another question? Because I was going to ask you some stuff too, like
Oh,
on that same note.
No, I was just wondering. My brother, one of my brothers just recently, so I have three little brothers. One of them just recently followed, and I was like, oh, that's a little hurtful. Like if your own family is like, well, let's see how this goes.
That's funny. Well, and
But
I'm curious. So you have younger brothers. So are you trying? Have they come to you for financial advice? Have you tried to push your advice on them? Which obviously doesn't work. I've never really chatted with my family about it, but I'm kind of like, hey, I want to make sure that like they know that they're doing the right things, you know. But it's better if they come to you. So what is going on with your family?
yeah, so I definitely pushed a lot of financial advice on them unwillingly. I don't know, something about being like the big sister. I'm just like, oh yeah, you need to know this. You need to be doing what I say you should be doing. But yeah, actually, my youngest brother was one of my first clients. Like he got a good job right out of school and had questions about like setting up retirement accounts. So he did come to me for help at one point. But yeah, I'm very pushy about it with my family. Like, oh, because like you want your family to get to experience the security, the joy of like getting to be free with your money. So some of each.
Do you do Roth IRAs, and did you give your brother advice to do Roth?
Yep, Roth IRAs. Oh my gosh, Doug, we have so many accounts. I am just an account whore, I guess, because we have Roth and traditional 401ks, we have Roth and traditional IRAs, a bunch of like we use Vanguard, but then we have a bunch of other taxable brokerages. So you get like the sign up bonus, so that is fun. And then I wanted to like learn about the different apps so that way, if my clients had questions, I'd be knowledgeable on how to use them.
Okay, that sort of makes sense too. And what's the cutoff for the Roth IRA income level? And I mention that because that was good advice that I got from my old planner, which I shouldn't have taken any of his other advice, but he was like, at some point you're going to make too much money, you won't be able to contribute, which eventually came true. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to make what's the cutoff currently?
I don't actually remember the cutoff. We just hit the point where like the income was high enough where we could put the money in, but we couldn't get the deduction. So I'm not. Ask me that in a year, and I'll have an answer.
Well, I think it's like if your income is like 130 or higher, something like that. And I'm not sure what it is, but at the time when I started my Roth, I was like, there's no way I'm going to make 100 and whatever. And then eventually you do, and then you're like, well, I'm glad I put some in. It is again like all strange problems to have, but yeah, if people don't have their Roth IRAs yet, they should if you have the
Yeah,
ability to. So.
yeah, I think that's a great way to get started. That was my husband's first investment was Roth IRA. And he started those young too, because I think that was one of the suggestions from his accountant was to do or no, he started with traditional IRA. I apologize. But yeah, I tend to lean towards Roth as much as you can just because of the tax-free growth, right?
Yep, you pay taxes ahead of time, and then, yeah. So cool. Well, where can people find you, Roxanne?
Yeah, so you can find me. My YouTube channel is Finance Rocks, no space, and that's ROX for Roxanne. And then blog is the same, financerocks.com. And social media, I'm most active on Instagram. So if you want to follow me, same there at Finance Rocks.
Very cool. I'll put links and everything so people can get to it easily. Thanks a lot, Roxanne. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. It was fun to chat.